into the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV WORLD. In today's show, we will be talking about some very, very important stories. The first is with reference to a very important decision that has come out, of course. It is
That has come out
executive
of
board meeting of
course.
the IMF that is
It is
expected to
the
continue today,
executive
and we're
board
so
meeting of the
happy, of course, to hear that the IMF
today,
board
and we're
has
so happy,
approved the
of course,
revival of
to
our
hear that the
EFF
IMF
program.
board has approved the revival of our EFF program. This is something that has been confirmed by the finance minister in a tweet as well. And this means, of course, that the seventh and eighth tranche of $1.17 billion is going to be coming into Pakistan very soon. And of course, moving on, we'll be seeing more inflow within the country as well through obviously other installments and loans as well, which is of course up to $37 billion. So we're going to see what this important announcement means considering the economic situation of the country at the moment, and then of course the flood situation as well the country is facing, which is our second segment of the show today. Of course, this is a catastrophe that is of epic proportion. It is a natural disaster that the country has been experiencing for quite some time now. And of course, we know that this is something that the entire world now is talking
33
about, since
million
of
people
course
have been affected.
33 million people have been affected within these unprecedented floods. We've had millions of homes destroyed. We have thousands of people who have been affected by this, thousands of livestock that has been affected. About 2 million acres of cultivated crops have been wiped out. And of course, when we talk about the number of people that we have lost, it has topped over 1,000. The toll is increasing day by day. In just about the last 24 hours, we've seen about 119 people losing their lives. So, of course, this is a national emergency that we're facing. The Prime Minister, including other institutions as well, have stepped up their rescue and relief efforts. There have been lots of funds allocated for this, and the rescue and relief activities are continuing along with international support that is being asked for. We're going to be, of course, talking about what needs to happen right now, since we, of course, have been hearing more and more news of floods coming in and potential more devastation in the country. So we need to be well prepared in advance and need to talk about what needs to be done in this regard. At the end, we will also be taking a look at the unfortunate and regrettable incident that we have been hearing in from the Afghan side. The Afghan Defense Minister, Mr. Yaqub Mujahid, has accused Pakistan of providing airspace to U.S. drones, particularly in the U.S. strike that killed the Al-Qaeda leader Zawahiri. And we, of course, know that this is something that the Afghan leadership has talked about now without any investigation, without any evidence, something they have claimed themselves. And this, again, is not in line with the diplomatic norm that has been outlined once again by the Foreign Office as well. And so we're going to be talking about the particular statement that has come in from the Afghan side and Pakistan's response in regard, which again reaffirms in the belief of sovereignty and territorial integrity, and has urged the Afghanistan side once again to make sure and to uphold their commitment of not allowing their soil be used any other territory, and be more responsible in terms of the statements that have come out. And talk about things without evidence, of course, is something that is not welcome, and accusing Pakistan of something that has not carried out and of course is not a champion of is also something regrettable that the Foreign Office has mentioned. So all of this is going to be part of the debate today. And of course, let me welcome, as always, in the show, senior analyst, Mr. Farrukh Pitafi, who's with us, and also Dr. Shahid Zia, executive director, Sanj Foundation, who has joined us. And we've also been joined by Mr. Bakar Shirazi, who is a disaster response expert, senior development specialist as well. They will be talking to us regarding the flood situation. But let us quickly first start with the announcement, of course, regarding the IMF board that has approved the revival of the EFF program. A lot was dependent on this. Also, the loans and investments that are expected to come in soon. And then, of course, the current economic crisis. But I'll start with you, Farrukh. When we talk about this particular announcement, how significant and important do you think this is, specifically considering the timeline and the situation that Pakistan currently is in, and the way that this is going to pave the way for future loans and investments from other countries as well?
Thank you very much, Sana. I think it is great news. Let me start by actually congratulating the government of Pakistan, especially Miftah Ismail Saab, who is the finance minister of Pakistan, because this whole story was in the making for quite some time. We know that since Sri Lanka situation actually erupted on the global scene, we have been worried that we might not end up with the bankruptcy as well. You have seen what happened in Sri Lanka and the kind of circumstances they are still facing at this moment. In that situation, of course, Sri Lanka still is rationing fuel and rationing food as well. Pakistan had to actually escape that kind of situation. Pakistan's economy was in dire states, and then you have to look at the state of affairs internationally, and you realize that because of that economic situation as well, because of growing inflation and then this talk of recession, the fear was that Pakistan might not be caught in the worst situation at the worst time possible. Because of that, of course, everyone was putting an effort, and then we saw that because Pakistan is usually, our politics is a divided house, that perhaps we won't be able to find the kind of unity that was needed. But mercifully, because Miftah Ismail Saab has been working very hard, because he has been working to ensure that Pakistan arranges all the important cogs in this wheel. Today, Pakistan has finally received the Bill of Clean Health. And because of that, Pakistan then can go to other IFIs, Pakistan can go to other donors, Pakistan can then also go for other options like bonds and other markets, so that our economy improves. This is great news indeed.
Absolutely. Farrukh, of course, when we talk about this, it's very closely linked to what's going on right now in terms of the floods as well. And before we talk more about that, I also want to mention that there is talk regarding how perhaps the scale of funding that the country would need, considering the flood situation, means that there needs to be more financing that is planned for, more so than perhaps the $37 billion that's already lined up in terms of loans and investments. Will that in any way impact the way that we're going to be moving forward along with the IMF and other countries as well?
And that is a very important point, Sana. Remember that before going to the IMF or actually getting this deal, Pakistan was facing a shortfall or a financing gap of somewhere around $30 billion for the annual bill, right? And Pakistan has finally, thanks to IMF, thanks to our brethren countries that have contributed immensely, we have arranged commitments of $37 billion. But having said that, so far we were waiting for the NDMA and the federal government to come up with a dollar figure regarding the losses that we have faced in the, these floods. So finally we have heard a figure that is $10 billion. Because of that, of course, Pakistan then once again has to go to, UN system. We are going to put, the flash warning and flash call for aid. And I think that already the aid has started arriving. So in coming days, hopefully the situation will improve. But regardless of that, a country that was somehow, financially bankrupt could not find any kind of solution. Today, there are political parties that keep on talking about Hakiki Azadi. On one side, you have to look at what Hakiki Azadi or true independence means. If you were, God forbid, bankrupted, do you think that the countries that are inimical to your nation would have actually not tried to actually twist your arm? So at this moment, because we have escaped this situation, we are in a better situation to actually get the aid and resume or start the reconstruction and relief activity.
Absolutely. That's wonderful to hear, of course. Let me also welcome in the debate now that we're talking about the flood situation as well in our next segment, Mr. Waqar and Dr. Shahid. Mr. Waqar, let me start with you. Of course, when we talk about the way that one needs to respond to natural disasters and unprecedented ones or ones that have that are of such huge scale, it becomes extremely important to strategize and plan and coordinate how all of this is going to be done. Of course, we understand that a lot of this is unprecedented. This is on a very huge scale. But the way that the different authorities have responded, how would you assess the situation in terms of what is needed at the moment? What sort of measures do you think are still required, and how other measures that have been taken earlier are actually panning out right now?
Well, many thanks indeed, Sana, for having me here today. Well, I believe that the climate change was not an unanticipated phenomenon in Pakistan, but unfortunately, because of the limited resources, our preparedness was not up to the mark, and the nature has reacted in a way which was not expected, but it was not unanticipated. There were predictions from May that there would be very heavy downpour in Pakistan, and the floods were quite expected. The catastrophe has happened now in Pakistan. 33 million, more than 33 million people have been affected by the floods. 200,000 plus households have been, housing structures have been completely swept away. More than 400,000 housing structures have been partially damaged, and 800,000 kettles have been lost. So these are just initial estimates. As the water will recede everywhere in Pakistan, we will be receiving the higher figures of casualties and losses in Pakistan, and we'll have to prepare ourselves for that as well. As far as your question about the rescue phase is concerned, I think it has been more than a week that the flash floods have hit many parts of Pakistan, including Gilgit-Baltistan, central Khyber Pakhtunkhwa like Swabi and now Nowshera, and then very southern areas of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and southern Punjab like Tank, DI Khan and DG Khan and Rajanpur, where the downpour, heavy downpour at the Koh Salman range have affected the people badly due to Rod Kohi flash floods. Nevertheless, in Balochistan and Sindh, I think it is on the apex scale, as you have mentioned, and we did not have the capacity. Any country, I think, any developing country would not be having the capacity to react immediately to a catastrophe at such massive scale. But it is the passion of our youth, it is the commitment of our people, our institutions, that we are coping up with the situation. We are trying to mitigate the challenge, and inshallah we'll do better in this. But right at the moment,
Carry on.
Yeah, finish the thought.
Right at the moment, we have been receiving news from many of the areas. Like I am connected in in southern Punjab, in southern Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, that the people are still trapped in some of the areas. So there is an intense need that the aerial operation is enhanced a bit, and there is an intense need that the local government put more effort, though the efforts by the Rescue 112 must be appreciated everywhere in Pakistan, wherever they have responded to rescue the people. They have not only rescued the people, but they have rescued the animal and livestock as well. And we have been receiving some very fascinating stories in time of this catastrophe. So we need to keep on this passion, and we will inshallah mitigate the situation.
Right, Sana, one liner, because Shirazi Sahab, while mentioning, did not actually cite the names of the places which were affected or disconnected. There are 4 villages apparently in the Koh Salman area which are still not on record, which are not in contact. So it is important to highlight those places as well, because then otherwise it can be catastrophic, right?
If you want me, these villages are Makkad, Rashid, Gara Murid, and another one. I did not remember the name. These are in Paroa district, Paroa Tehsil of district Dera Ismail Khan, and these are still not reached by any of the teams. Right. So we need to beef up the aerial operation here, I think.
Right.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Shah, of course, what is needed in such a natural disaster, and the way there, of course, are priorities, there are urgent needs, urgent rescue and relief efforts that are underway. There's, of course, a lot that is going on in terms of people who are already undergoing this crisis, the survivors as well, who have lost their homes, who have lost their source of income, who have children, who have people who are sick. And there's so many needs that perhaps are unmet and take the sideline, especially needs of women, which are extremely important as well. And so when we talk about the way that this entire effort towards helping the people in need of this crisis is there, how exactly do you think we can incorporate those aspects as well, that perhaps don't seem as urgent at the moment, but the people are suffering from them?
Thank you, Sana. I think when we are talking about 33 million people who are affected, and it's a vast area, more than 2 million hectares of agricultural land is under the water, and it's really challenging for any country, not just Pakistan with limited resources, to handle this situation. Even sometimes back when there was a flood in US, we know that even the human bodies were sort of floating in the water for a couple of days. So we are talking about from the north to up to the Balochistan, and the millions and millions people been evacuated, and now they are waiting for the support. I think the next couple of weeks are important for us to provide support to the people and then save the lives. And then when I say save the lives, because they have moved from their villages, from their areas, and then they are being camped, they are not with the adequate facilities anywhere. People who are not affected are providing all kind of support on their own. What we need to do is how to coordinate these efforts. In some areas maybe there will be more support, and then if we will not be able to coordinate this kind of activity, then there will be areas where inadequate support will be provided. In this time we need to provide them the dry food, sort of ration, like biscuits and others, because there is no cooking facility in those camps, and we need to make all out efforts to prevent the waterborne diseases, because that will be the next challenge, what kind of water they are forced to drink, because the clean drinking water is not available. And I am very happy to see that the people, even from the villages, for those who are organized with the organizations or the individuals also, they are trying to do something for their fellow Pakistanis.
Right.
That is very important. And let me.
Sir, you can complete your answer as well and just add to it. When we talk about different individuals and different bodies also contributing in their own capacity, I want to understand how this perhaps can be more coordinated, or whether there is a way to coordinate this and make sure that the people who are perhaps the most affected, or the people who are in most need, or the people who haven't received aid before, are actually getting help, and not people who have support from other organizations. Is there a way to be able to perhaps align and take these efforts together?
Normally in these kind of situations, and we do feel that our district coordinating committees are getting active. They are engaging people, they are providing the platform to share the information, so that those who are there with some resources can go and help the people. But in these kind of situations, quite often we ignore the specific needs of the women, children, and particularly the young girls who are affected and shifted to the situations where they have inadequate facilities for the toilet facilities, washroom facilities, and then some specific requirements of the women particularly.
Yeah, and that was highlighted as well. Allow me to actually ask the next question, Dr. Shahzyar. Since we are talking about a situation where things are actually still unfolding and we are looking at the state of affairs the way they are, the question at this moment is the kind of numbers that you have and Shirazi Sahab have mentioned regarding agricultural destruction. How are we going to cope with that kind of a situation? Because already we are in a super cycle, global super cycle, where prices are really up. And then there is something sad about our own people. We have seen that there is an episode of or matter of price jacking that takes place, right? For example, the tents prices have gone up. Similarly, food prices have gone up. Already in Karachi, we are hearing tomatoes are being sold at 600 rupees per kg. How do you think that this country is going to cope with that kind of a situation?
In this type of situation, when the market disruptions due to the damages to the infrastructure happens, it is quite normal in the beginning that some people try to benefit from that.
Yeah, but this is not disruption, it is bulldozing.
Yes. And even in Islamabad and in the Rawalpindi, the prices have almost been doubled of onions and tomatoes. But what I'm more worried about is we can do without potatoes, we can do without onion and tomatoes. I'm worried about our wheat stocks. Wheat stored in those like say in Sindh and in Balochistan and in these areas, whether at home or in the government storages, have been lost.
Right.
And that is a huge quantity of
Dr. Saab,
wheat lost.
This is the dilemma of talking to a specialist. When I asked a question, I was seeking an answer. You have added to my question. Of course, this is also one of the biggest problems.
I'm coming to that.
How do you solve it?
I'm coming to that. And with that, if we add the 4 million tons of wheat shortage that we were already facing and just were thinking to import, and then I was thinking of that we will not be able to afford that kind of import without having the resources available from IMF and other countries. Luckily, fortunately, those resources are now available. There will be some shortage of the perishable items, but we will be soon better off because we still have that much wheat in the areas where those are not affected, that we can do before we get the imports from
Absolutely. Sana, with your permission, can I ask another question? Can I put it to Shirazi Sahab? Shirazi Sahab, we are looking at the state of affairs, right? At this moment, we still are taking stock of what is going on in the country, the kind of losses there are. Of course, a lot of things might not still be reported. But the question is this issue of climate change. We all talk about it, but we have hardly seen any progress so far. I mean, it was during the previous government's, actually this government's previous terms last year, when we saw the first draft of the environment or climate change policy, similarly water policy. When are we going to actually take these matters seriously? We keep on telling the world that Pakistan is among the most vulnerable countries. When are we going to tell ourselves that this is true as well?
Many thanks indeed, Farrukh Saab. You have made the case easy for me. I was referring to the same in my first comment, that it was not an unforeseen phenomena. It was not unanticipated phenomena. Everybody knows in the world that the climate change is there, and we belong to the top 5 countries which are affected the most by the climate change.
Others are very small countries.
Yeah,
so
others
Pakistan
are very
is
small
the number
countries.
one technically.
Yeah. So we are technically number 1. But in terms of preparedness, we do not only lack in terms of implementation, but in terms of policy as well. There has been constant tree cut in Pakistan. We have been constructing everywhere in terms of real estate developers without permission, without any particular legislation. we are constructing in ways of water courses. So the nature has reacted in a way. So whenever the catastrophe hits Pakistan, we go for some symptomatic treatments. We don't say anything about strategic things, that what we had to do in previously, which we did not, and finally we have struck by the calamity or by the catastrophe in terms of a disaster. So which is a bigger disaster in itself. So I think that Pakistan should go to the international forum and tell the international community that our carbon footprint is less than 1%. And we are affected by the carbon footprint of rest of the countries. So rest of the countries must helping us with the resources required to.
Dr. Waqar, I'd just like to point something over here, and you can also add to that. This, of course, is something that we would assume, and that has been talked about before, and we would assume that the developed countries and the contributors of carbon emissions actually know and understand the way that is going to impact the developing world and how the developed world is more responsible in terms of carbon emissions. And there has been numerous occasions, numerous platforms where this has been reiterated, not just from Pakistan, but other countries as well. How much do you think of an impact that will have in terms of how we have to deal with such disasters? Because at the end of the day, climate change advocacy and efforts towards recognizing and understanding, working towards climate change have not been very fruitful in terms of the way that it is needed. And perhaps the urgency of the matter is still not understood or acted upon the way we need to. So maybe we're dealing with a situation where we'll have to deal with more natural calamities, whether or not we cut down enough trees or we have some localized effort as well. Of course, they're important, but there's a lot of impact that's coming that's perhaps beyond our control. So do you think we need to focus a lot right now on our strategy or talk about how the developed worlds need to act more responsibly? Can we actually ensure that? Or do we need to really work at home in terms of perhaps the inevitability in a way of the situation?
Can I add to this question as well? Earlier, when Shirazi Sahab was talking about this, he said that we should be going to the international forums. But there is a forum in Pakistan that is called Parliament of Pakistan. We have seen various briefings in the parliament about other things, dialogue with Taliban, this crisis, that crisis. Why is it that we haven't taken this case first to the parliament and then to the people of Pakistan? And Imran Khan Sahab used to talk about this billion-tree tsunami. We still are talking about deforestation. Did that not cover anything at all? Dr. Jha?
I think that's
too many questions?
No, not too many questions, but this is so unfortunate that we seldom see serious debates on people's issues in our parliament. That is our complaint to our representatives who sit in the parliaments. Quite often, many of them do not talk a single word for 5 years while sitting in the parliament.
I know one such eminent.
So what I would say that when we all know that the storage is the first solution, storage of the rainwater, that we have already politicized and not making adequate efforts on that, and that is a long-term solution. The next two that are easier and then we can do in piecemeal are the protections and diversions. Wherever we see heavy pressure, we should be able to plan how to divert water from there to the other areas. And to the particularly, I always talk about the 3 rivers that we have lost to the India are still there in the dry and big storage. If we invest a little bit, and that is a sort of natural storage, and we need to divert
some water to
that infrastructure to divert water to that side. That is easier. Protection infrastructure was built way before, maybe after 73 sort of floods in Bhutto regime. The flood commission and all this effort was made, and that is really was helping us for decades to minimize the losses to the flood. But after that, we do not see any serious effort where we are really serious that we faced 2010. Now we are in a bigger and worse situation than 2010. We do not see any serious effort after 2010 except restoring the lost infrastructure. And almost the same season was in 2010, and we were busy in helping the people. We were not really planning when the water recedes, and just after that there will be sowing season for wheat. Millions of farmers now, we are talking about 2 million hectares. That means huge quantity of seed would be needed if we want really that 2 million hectares or almost 2 million hectares under wheat. If we will fail to do that, I'm feeling that there will be a bigger food crisis.
It's of course really important, but and we can talk about how it wasn't done so in the past. But considering the impacts or the potential consequences that we're seeing right now, when do you think this planning should be starting? Right about now, and is somebody doing something about that?
There is something that we need to start immediately. That is, always engage people who suffer, that they know what needs to be done in their areas at the local level, and that can minimize the risk for those who are suffering almost every year. And then when there is a bigger sort of flood like this, they suffer the most. And second, I would like to raise this issue that's very important. We need to focus on our people, not seeing the face who will be there when we divert the water. The water protection, the flood protection arrangements done in different parts of Pakistan, when it comes to the pressure that we have to divert, in 70 years we haven't learned technically the best area from where we will divert. It always depends who is in power at that time and whose lands will be saved. So that is ridiculous. We need to talk, save our people. The people's lives should be the first criteria to make a decision what to do, not the buildings, not anything else. First, people's lives. Second,
I'll take my last. Yes, you want to add something?
Is important.
Yes.
So,
are you adding something? Okay. So, Mr. Shirazi, I just want to ask you something regarding what was spoken about the importance of people's lives, and of course that's important. There have been lots of videos circulating, particularly coming in from Swat as well, that there were hotels or constructions right near the embankments that got sunk within these floods as well. And this was also said that this was perhaps the natural course, and that it was sort of a reclaiming of nature in terms of what was earlier there, and how these particular settlements or infrastructures were not safe and were advised not to be constructed. Is there a way that we can perhaps enforce that or regulate that? Because there was earlier also discussion regarding how, despite regulations, the process of getting permissions through backdoor channels happens, and the constructions along these embankments that are of course not safe in case of floods continue to happen.
Can you repeat the question? But I lost. What was the question actually?
My question was that when we are talking about saving lives, there was obviously a huge risk to people who had homes or houses or hotels constructed right near the river banks. And despite regulations, this continues to happen. Is there the way that we can regulate this?
I think, as I mentioned previously, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just very quickly, I wanted to remind you that in 2005 we had an earthquake. After that, we actually went and retrofitted buildings so that they don't collapse that quickly. Remember Margla Towers and all? After that, nothing of the sort has happened. So is there a possibility that existing houses can also be treated with some kind of system that this does not happen, that they don't collapse that quickly?
Well, I believe that in terms of nature, or in terms of especially the force of water, you cannot stand in front of water. Anything like structure cannot stand in against some massive power like water have when it is flowing. I think there should be a policy which should stop people, regulate the construction and real estate builders, that the water courses may not be hurdled with the constructions. It is the only way. And I think that it is the time, there is a trade-off between the discussion that what should be done as symptomatic treatment right at the moment, and what should be our strategic response to the climate change. And let me share very clearly that there is no instant solution to the climate change. It will take time. So you'll have to.
How much time?
Like a decade.
Okay.
And meanwhile,
let me remind you that last flood we had was in 2010.
Yeah.
And after 12 years, we still are talking about the need for more time.
Yeah, there was a question by Sana as well that.
No, but I will keep on adding to it, right?
Yeah. There was a question that when we'll be starting the planning. I think that, don't you think that we are a bit too late already? So the planning phase should have been carried out 3 decades ago, when it was already anticipated, or it was already declared by the world that the climate change is there, the global warming is there, and there would be catastrophes, natural disasters.
Yeah, but we cannot change the past.
We cannot change the past. But for the future, if we talk right at the moment, I think at the moment, in my opinion, the people are in trouble. We should focus on the rescue, relief, and then we'll go towards early recovery and rehabilitation.
Okay.
After these phases are over, we'll again be switched towards the overall planning and implementation to cope up and mitigate the overall negative impacts of climate change.
Can I very quickly correct one impression that has been going on for some time, Sana, and that is about Swat situation. I understand that many people had actually built their buildings within the water channels, right? And that has been a subject of discussion for many years. But this time, the kind of flood we have seen, it has not restricted itself to water courses, right? Bahrain has been destroyed. There are umpteen other places which have been swept away. So we cannot merely actually blame the victim this time. We have to take responsibility the way things have been actually unfolding, and our ineptness that we have not been able to, as was pointed out earlier, we haven't actually put in the kind of effort that was needed to mitigate or stop this kind of catastrophe.
Right, absolutely. And of course, the victims are never to blame. Let me just quickly get Mr. Shahid's comment. I believe you wanted to add something.
I just wanted to see, we're sitting here in Islamabad, and almost every year or every other year we see the floods coming going from Islamabad to Leh, and then Rawalpindi people are suffering. And then every year they are adding more and more sort of constructions into the Leh. Yeah. It's squeezing every year, and then we are talking after every flood and do nothing to stop that or to clear that.
That's a very interesting point, Sana, because we are talking about places which are close to Islamabad, the federal capital.
Yes,
and then we are unable to do anything over there, and that shows that will of the governments to do that. And then
absolutely.
the same thing.
Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Shahid. We're almost out of time, so thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Shahid Zia and Mr. Vikas Shirazi, for being with us and talking to us regarding, of course, this extremely important issue and the huge humanitarian crisis and the natural disaster that Pakistan currently is facing. And we hope that we're able to come out of it soon and help all the victims, and that there are less victims in the future as well, and that we get support from our international partners as well. Very quickly at the end of the show, we also want to talk about the statement coming in from the Afghan Taliban regarding the usage of Pakistani airspace that they accuse Pakistan of providing to the US, particularly the US strike that had killed Al-Qaeda leader in July, al-Zawahiri. And of course, this is something that has been spoken about without any evidence or without any investigation being complete, as also in the words of the Afghan Defense Minister. Farrukh, when we take a look at this situation, of course, there have been border tensions between Pakistan and Afghanistan since the US withdrawal. There have been a spike in terrorist activities within Pakistan as well, and we have been trying and engaging the Afghan Taliban on various matters, and also particularly on their commitment of not letting their soil be used against any other territory. And there's a lot of trust deficit that already exists. But then on top of that, when we hear statements coming in which outrightly accuse Pakistan of providing airspace to the US to be used against Afghanistan or for drone strikes within Afghanistan, this is of course something that is extremely irresponsible and regrettable, and will impact the already trying relations that we're having to build. Considering this particular statement, how do you see the way that the Afghan Taliban's response is going to amount to how Pakistan and the Afghan Taliban are going to evolve and proceed?
Right, Sana, as you know, that Afghanistan has this unfortunate habit of externalizing all its problems whenever there is international pressure. This has been going on for past 40 years, and we have seen governments after governments which actually kept on doing this, blaming Pakistan for whatever was going wrong within their government or within their country. And unfortunately, this time too, although it took them some time, they ended up, Afghan Taliban also ended up doing exactly the same. This time actually the situation is different. In the past, usually there was this blame game that Pakistan might be aiding or abetting these very Taliban, and this time actually they have been caught with their hand in the proverbial cookie jar. A high value international target was found in their country, and then that terrorist was killed. Pakistan has made it clear that our airspace, our land was not used. But unfortunately, because it is convenient, because the Afghan Taliban are still a divided house, it seems that they found the best scapegoat to be Pakistan. If they continue to do such things, they are not making any friends here either, right? They have already very expertly alienated the entire world. And now they are going to actually alienate the few countries which still are sympathetic to Afghanistan. They are really going to damage Afghanistan's long-term interest.
Absolutely, and we really hope that the Afghan Taliban understand this and make more responsible statements and try and understand that Pakistan has always extended its support. But of course, we will not be accepting such statements coming in from anybody. And of course, our airspaces and our land is free, being used to not be used against any other territory, and is free from any other obligation or any other countries use it as well. This needs to be clear. Of course, we also want the same kind of commitment from Afghanistan, that their soil be not used against any other territory, particularly Pakistan, which has been seeing a spike in terrorist activities. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.